Michael Allison.
Javelin thrower at any level this year, big personal best at a newly laid track in Chelmsford to win the under-20 title. So the UK's best this year, looking for 78.07, would be a big PB.
At this stage by Germany with 4 goals.
We don't want to tell our dreams, we want to show them. Hello everybody and welcome to another episode of the Athlete Podcast sponsored by Sports for Champions. Today I am delighted to be joined by UK #1 javelin thrower Michael Allison. How are you today, Michael?
Yeah, very well, thank you.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We'll start at the beginning as we always do. How did you first get into javelin?
So I've been a pretty sporty kid growing up, played a bit of rugby, but didn't really do much athletics or javelin. And after COVID had happened and I had a home gym at home, so I'd spent quite a lot of time in the gym. I gave a go at javelin at a small athletics meet, like a school athletics meet, and I threw a distance that was like pretty good, and decided at that point that I should probably take it a bit seriously and joined an athletics club, started competing at proper meets as well.
Did you know that first time, sort of like everybody's throwing, I don't know in terms of meterage, but are you throwing way beyond them and you think, okay, actually I might have something?
Yeah, so I'd given it a go at school meets before, but was not throwing anything crazy, like 30 metres maybe. And then, just sort of out of nowhere through, I think it was low 50 metres, which was above the English school's qualifying standard. And everyone else is throwing sort of 30. And I thought, we should probably give a go at this.
And then you joined the athletics club. Can you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, so I joined Winter Athletics Club, and that just meant I could compete at sort of like athletics club league meets and other stuff, and competed, went to English schools that year, and then my current coach saw me at a competition at the end of the year and said, I think you've got some talent, I'd like to work with you.
Interesting. So I know you said earlier before the podcast that you built up a lot of your sort of muscle and your physicality during the COVID period in a bit of a home gym situation. And then in terms of as you progress into the athletics club, how did it work with your technique? Did you have a lot to work on there, a lot of room to grow? Yeah,
so physically I was good. I was pretty good already. Most of what we were doing was technical work, but it meant that because I already had that strength and the power, it meant that I was able to progress pretty quickly, and it was just refining the technique really that I had to do.
In terms of the mechanics, what kind of things did you have to work on?
Because I'd been to the gym a lot, I was quite tight, and you actually in javelin want to be quite like loose so that your arm can, instead of like forcing it with your arm, you can make your arm be almost like a whip because it's super loose and relaxed. So we did quite a lot of stretching and just work on making me be looser really.
Loosening up your muscles around that area. What makes obviously I imagine people have different techniques depending on the body composition and things like that, but in terms of for you, what makes a really good throw in terms of the mechanics?
Fast run up, then you don't want your run up to be like jerky, it's got to be nice and smooth. Then, like I said, nice and relaxed in the arm so that your arm is like a whip. You want your left leg to be nice and straight. You plant that on the floor, and then just a nice like finish with the fingers as well.
What do you do with the fingers in terms?
You don't really think about it, but like on the good throws, it feels like instead of releasing above yourself, you release like out in front,
like projecting it forward. That's interesting. How did your first season go with the athletics club?
So at the English Schools Nationals, I came 5th that year, which was okay, and I ended up throwing 61 meters at the end of the year, which was it was like okay, but nothing crazy special, but like okay for my first year.
And then in terms of progressing and taking that next level, did you have clear sort of goals of what you needed to do to take it to? Or were you not thinking about Team GB and taking it professional?
No, we were. So my coach and I had realised that, like, because I mentioned I was quite physically developed, we realised like it could be quite exciting that if I could refine my technique and make those technical jumps, like I could be on for something. And we knew it was the World Under-20 Championships that summer, So we didn't really tell anyone this, but in the back of our heads we were thinking that could be possible. And spoiler, but I made it.
That's amazing. Wow. And what was that moment like when you first sort of did you have to throw over a certain distance?
Yeah, so the qualifying distance was 69 meters, which, like, improving 8 meters in a year is quite a big jump. And I wasn't really throwing that well throughout most of the season, and I'd thrown 65, so a decent improvement already, but not what I thought I could do. And then in one competition I went in and my best was 65, and out of the 6 throws in that competition, 5 of them were over my previous best.
Wow.
And I ended up with just under 70 meters. It was 69.70, and that qualified me out of nowhere. So no one was really expecting it apart from me and my coach.
That's amazing. It's so cool to work on something in the lab and then take it out there to the world. Was there a bit of a response from the community?
Well, yeah, because I'd only been doing javelin for about a year, no one really knew who I was, and then suddenly I qualified for the World Championships, and I was getting calls from the team managers and the team coaches sort of congratulating me and saying, like, who are you really?
That's amazing. Wow.
Because most people don't have their first, like, international competition or a competition that big. They'll have some smaller thing first, but because I had such a big jump in my best, that my first international competition was the World Championships.
That's amazing. So that's the under-20 Worlds?
Yes.
Where did that take place?
It was in Colombia, in South America.
Wow. Okay.
Which was a very fun trip.
What was that your first trip to South America?
Yeah.
How was that?
You don't really see much of the country at these competitions, especially because Colombia's not the safest. So we were pretty much just in the hotel. But even still, it's nice it's quite a nice atmosphere just to meet all the other athletes. And luckily, most of them do speak English. So it's just nice to get to know people from other countries.
With that being your first international competition, did you feel nervous going into it?
Yeah, I definitely did, but equally sort of, I didn't have much
like expectation.
Yeah, because like I knew that it was my first time. I was happy to be there really, but we did have a goal that was to make the final, because at big competitions there'll be a qualifying round and a final, and I ended up throwing 10 centimeters less than my PB to make the final.
Wow. So
I was pretty happy with that.
That's amazing. Wow. Yeah. So then you went through to the final. How many people in the final?
Top 12 are in the final.
Top 12. And how did you get on?
There was a big thundstorm and delays. I'm making excuses, but it didn't go the best.
Right.
But I mean, making the final was my main goal, so I was super happy, because in qualifying you only get 3 rounds, and my first 2 throws were really awful.
Right. You're thinking this is a long trip.
I was like, oh, this is a long trip to not make the final, but I managed to pull out in my 3rd round.
Wow. And then going into that 3rd round of the qualifying, are you thinking, like, do you try and do it any differently, or do you just try and bring yourself even further back into that sort of place where you know that your technique's on point?
Yeah, my first 2 throws I was just making some technical mistakes. Maybe I was a little bit nervous. It was a much bigger atmosphere than I was used to. 3rd round I just remembered what I had to do technically, and it was a big throw.
Mum and Dad come out to Colombia?
Not to Colombia, because it was quite a long way if I hadn't made the final for them to come.
Yeah, definitely. And that being your first one, obviously, the idea being plenty more to come after.
Yeah, exactly.
And then from there, what did you go on to do in terms of coming back to the UK?
So I think that was my last competition of that year, and then started at university that September, still working with the same coach all throughout my first year at university. And then last summer it was the European Under-20 Championships, which for javelin, Europe is it's not like sprints or long distance where you've got Jamaica and Ethiopia and Kenya for distance. So Europe is sort of the dominant force in javelin. So the Europeans is almost the same as the World Championships in terms of standard. So I was like super excited for that, and in the end ended up with bronze medal there, came 3rd.
That's incredible. Wow. And then that was only your 2nd international tournament?
No, I'd had a few smaller ones in between the 2.
So after your first
so
went back and
I had one in Sweden, a couple in Germany.
Right,
in between the 2.
So then by the time you rock up at the Euros, do you thinking, I kind of know the deal here?
I felt much more comfortable as sort of someone who was more experienced by then.
Yeah, makes sense. You touched on it just before talking about the European Championships, but you had just started university. I know that your education is something that's really important to you. Can you tell us a bit about that and about how that plays off with obviously such big training commitments?
Yeah, so I am studying physics at Oxford University, which obviously is quite a tough course, but a tough university. So I do have to spend a lot of time studying as well. And I would say I think it gives me an edge over other competitors because I just have so much more to deal with that it makes me way more disciplined, and I'm better at managing my time. And like I never miss training sessions for work. I make sure I manage to balance my university work with training.
Wow. And then obviously studying physics and throwing javelin, is there any sort of lessons that you can kind of take over from that, or even perhaps just that you're thinking in that mindset and you're sort of thinking within those frameworks? Is there anything you can apply?
I do quite like a lot of the biomechanics and the science behind sport. So I read the biomechanical studies we have out there, and when it comes to any like physical testing, I'm always asking the people testing about the numbers and like what's going on. So I do think it gives me a little bit of an edge, but when I'm running down the runway, I'm not really thinking about angles, and I'm not working out equations.
That's funny. And then in terms of for the future, I know obviously you're really promising in the field of javelin. Do you think that you'll sort of see out your career in sport and then maybe go into something physics related?
Yeah, so I mean, if all goes to plan, I'll have a career in sport first, but javelin's quite destructive on the body, so you can't take anything for granted, and if you're lucky you're early 30s, mid 30s, so I haven't decided what I'd like to go into afterwards, but physics is always a possibility.
Not bad to fall back on.
Yeah,
definitely. And then in terms of, you said there about the wear and tear on the body, I've never really thrown javelin, but having played a bit of cricket and stuff, I think repetitive throws of any kind, especially your rotator cuffs and just that arm in general, is that the kind of thing that you expect?
Yeah, so injuries are very common in javelin. It's the shoulder, the elbow, sometimes the back, but I mentioned earlier, because I had quite a big background in the gym and strength and conditioning, I'd say that's played to my advantage because I've never had any injuries, and I owe that all to my physical development.
Touch wood.
Yeah, I do a lot of work, stretching, and I do a lot of gymnastic work and work in the gym just to physically prepare the body. So it's not just luck that I haven't had injuries. I try and minimize the risks.
Yeah, that's good. You can do all you can. Unfortunately, sometimes it's just bad luck, but yeah, all you can do really is give yourself all of the preparation possible. Can you tell me a bit about Paris 2024? I know obviously that may come a little bit soon, but tell us a little bit about possible.
Yeah, for me it is a little bit soon. We're not writing it off, but it's not the main one we're aiming for. So I'm currently on the British Athletics Olympic Futures program, which is a program that sort of supports athletes who should be at the Olympics in the future. And I'm well on track for LA Olympics, which will be in 2028. Right. But yeah, we're not ruling out Paris, but it's not our main goal.
What would you have to do to get to Paris?
The standard set by UK Athletics is 83. Which is more than my current personal best, but if I improve the same amount I have for the past 2 years, I'll manage to make it. But obviously progress does slow over time, so
yeah, you plateau eventually.
You don't know when you're going to plateau and how much.
Interesting. And then in terms of, obviously your PBs has to be in competition, that's when it's recorded. Have you thrown that kind of distance in training? Do you have a rough idea?
No, so I don't really throw very far in training. It's normally just like easy throws, repetition, drilling your technique. Sometimes you do need to have training sessions where you throw hard, but a lot of the time it's actually quite easy throws.
Right, okay, it makes sense, I suppose, to just reduce that wear and tear that obviously is so destructive as you move from. Is it a case that you kind of manage that a little bit more earlier on in your career, or do you feel like you can get away with a little bit more because obviously you're young?
And maybe I can get away with more now, but we do try and, the reason we do a lot of easy throws is because we're trying to just make the technique both be good so you can throw far and safe on the body, because there are some technical mistakes which can cause injury. If you make them, you can blow out, you can tear your elbow from certain mistakes. So yeah, it's just technique is super important for that reason as well.
Tell us a little bit about how technique and strength play off against each other. Some sports, you get sports like obviously football, where it's almost more of a mental game, and then you get obviously long distance, which has a little bit of both. Tell us about javelin.
There's sort of different ways to throw javelin. In a lot of sports, like take shot put for example, everyone's big because you have to be big and strong. In javelin, it's a bit different. You get some people who are sort of super quick, they're sprinters, they super quick on the runway, but then you get some other people who are a little bit slower, but they're just absolute physical monsters. So there's sort of different ways to do it.
Makes sense. And then in terms of your training, can you tell us what your typical sort of week's training looks like?
Yeah, so surprisingly, we don't actually throw javelins that often. In winter, we throw once a week, and then at the moment, and throughout all of summer, I'll be throwing twice a week, just because it's so destructive on the body.
Of course.
So we throw medicine balls, we throw weighted balls, javelin balls, sprint work, plyometric work, gym sessions, sometimes a bit of gymnastics. I do some work on the rings, on the parallel bars, just to strengthen the shoulders.
That's cool. Wow, that's not something I'd expected.
Yeah, no, it's just because it just works the shoulders and the rotator cuff in different ways to the gym.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And then in terms of nutrition, is that something you take fairly seriously?
Yeah, I'm pretty hot on my nutrition. I cook all of my meals, try and obviously high protein to recover, and yeah, I try and eat not much processed stuff, just whole foods.
Yeah, where possible.
Yeah.
And you've got a favourite cheat meal?
I quite like chicken wings.
Chicken wings?
Buffalo wings with blue cheese sauce.
Yeah, that sounds nice, to be fair. And then something new that was just started asking our athletes, it's not something that had a huge amount of importance placed on it sort of over the last 10 years, but in terms of rest and recovery, it has become big recently with people wearing sort of bands and things like that to check how much they're sleeping, how much they're resting. Is that something that you're paying any attention to?
I don't wear anything that tracks my sleep, but sleep is so important. I think quite often you have people wondering about such minute details about diet or supplements, when it's like, if you're sleeping 6 hours a night, if you sleep 8 or 9, it's going to transform your training so much that you don't need to worry about the small stuff. Just get enough protein, make sure you're sleeping enough, and yeah, your recovery is going to be way better.
Yeah, I think it's I don't know whether the science has changed or whether perhaps just people's perceptions have changed, but it has become a lot bigger in the athletics world about sleep just being so key.
No, it definitely is. I think there's studies on it, but equally just anecdotally, when I sleep better, I train way better.
Can you tell us a bit about funding and about how that works in sports and how that works in javelin, and perhaps how Sports for Champions can maybe help out with that?
Yeah, so it's quite difficult because there's a gap between where I'm at, where you're not on full funding, you're not getting your salary from British athletics, so you're almost at a disadvantage because some of your competitors from other countries perhaps are getting a bit more funding than you are. So yeah, Sports for Champions just bridges that gap almost, where you can help me get to that next level where I am on full funding, and yeah.
Perfect. And then in terms of being an athlete, do you think it's made you a better person?
I'd say so, yeah. I think there's a lot of qualities that you get from competing at a high level in something. I think the discipline and the discipline's obviously good, and as long as you stay humble, I think it definitely helps.
What kind of legacy would you like to leave behind in your sport?
Obviously, there's achievements that I'd definitely like to make the Olympics in the future, make an Olympic final. It's quite a tough question.
Looking deep inside.
Yeah. I just so in the UK, previously in the 90s, we had quite a run of some successful javelin throwers. At one point we had 4 people all at the same time throwing 85 meters, which, for those of you that don't know, 85 meters is, you qualify for every Olympics. That's like world class. Mm-hmm. At one point we had 4 85 meter throwers, whereas in the UK currently we've got no 80 meter throwers. So I just quite like to help bring back javelin to the UK. And right now there's quite a few good youngsters coming up in the under 20, under 18 ranks. So I just sort of like to help like inspire them and just create a culture of a few more good javelin throwers coming back.
We'd love to see it. And then you touched on it just then previously, but maybe more specifically, what would be one major goal that you're working towards for the future?
I mean, sort of short, medium term goal to throw 80 metres. In the UK, one person in the last 10 years has thrown 80 once.
Wow.
So to do that would be quite a big achievement. And then, more medium, long term, LA Olympics 2028. Definitely, that's where I want to be.
Well, we'll have everything crossed for you. And then in terms of advice, if somebody came to you, maybe a young person thinking of starting a career in sport, or maybe more specifically javelin, what advice would you give?
Focus on building your physical base as wide as possible, because excelling in sport is so much about not getting injured. Because if you get injured for 6 months, you can't train properly. You're not progressing for those 6 months. It's so much just about who can stay the least injured the longest. And I think just improving your physical base of just your strength, your mobility, just all of that, it's going to stop injury. I think that's key. And as I mentioned, that's sort of my strong point, that I work so much, and I have done, on just like physical preparedness. That's the reason I don't get injured.
There you go. Well, I think that's some fantastic advice. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
No, you're more than welcome, and thank you for everyone joining at home. We'll see you next time. Cheers.